You're listening to BCCIC's Media Resources, the podcast with Damian Piper. Innovative Communities takes everything you thought you knew about how a not-for-profit organization should operate and spins your world around. The ICO operates putting an emphasis on the importance of interpersonal relationships. They bring people who want to make positive social changes together and foster those relationships. The method of operation they endure promotes creativity and innovation in the people who are involved. Relationships develop and people realize they have common interests which can be contributed together to pursue change. What makes ICO so unique is that they don't have any employees. The entire organization is volunteer-run. Every penny, 100% of a donation, goes directly towards fighting poverty in the projects that they launch. Everything is done over the World Wide Web, leaving absolutely no need for a physical office environment. John Mitchell is one half of the founding members of the ICO. He is the president of Foundation and chairman of the board. Now, thank you, John, for joining me.
Pleasure.
Now, the organizational method that Innovative Communities uses is unique to say the least. This concept of a chaotic organization, chaotic being a combination of chaos and order, defined as the behavior of any self-governing organization or system which harmoniously blends characteristics of order and chaos, pattern in a way dominated by neither chaos or order, or the characteristic of the fundamental organizing principles of evolution in nature, which is supposed to be the defining part of the definition when you're addressing sustainable chaotic organizations. But I was wondering if you could explain how this works for a nonprofit.
Okay. Well, one of the important things is traditionally organizations stress task first. We have to do something. And then they build a task team. And then they set the motivational climate, either extrinsic or intrinsic, to try to get the job done. And they find, hey, how come it doesn't always get the job done, and how come we get in each other's way? So the approach that we use in our motto is, above all, we are friends working together. And if a task gets before relationships, do not do the task. So we're not talking about, would you mind awfully not doing the task? What we say is, get the relationship straight first. And from relationships, task defines itself. And it becomes a bottom-up process, so that indigenous people and local people themselves begin to understand their solutions rather than having it imposed. So it breaks away part of the traditional hierarchical structure, but allows a far more dynamic entity. Now, does it work all the time? Well, the easiest way of saying, 5 years ago there were two of us. We had $40,000 in debt to lawyers and accountants. The mortgages equal the value of the buildings. Today we've got about $2 million in net assets, that's financial assets, and we have 124 team members, volunteers, every one of them, and over 800 friends, and operating in 6 countries. Does the model work? Well, we think it does. The issue comes down to is, are people prepared to go in the model that we believe works, which is total and utter transparency, 100 cents in the dollar to the initiative, no money taken in overhead or administration. And people can see live online. So it's not a question of saying historically online, your annual report or a quarterly report. It means once a check is approved, it shows immediately online in the balances. Anybody in the world who has a computer and access to the net for the last 5.5 years can see exactly to the penny what we have in the bank, how we spend our money on that initiative. They can see it, and that gives people a lot of trust. People have some distrust surrounding traditional NGOs today. Where does their money go? In the ICO model, we say, well, you can make that judgment based upon what you can see. We think it makes a difference.
Now, I want to talk about one of your future initiatives, the goal that's coming up, or one of the projects, Run for Tomorrow.
Yeah.
A 10-person team of marathon runners composed to raise awareness of the importance of healthy living and exercising, help improve individual lifestyles, raise awareness of important charities and their activities, as well as funding for those charities. It's all set for 2012 and to end in London just in time for the Summer Olympics. Crazy. After 178 days, 30 countries, total of 854 marathons, 22,385 miles, passing all kinds of people in the process. How do you take a campaign like this and get it up off the ground?
Well, we've got very good people, and we have also partners that we're working with in the UK to help bring all this about, and this is very, very exciting. This isn't easy. This is a major logistical initiative. We hope it could be a continual kind of situation in the future, but at the moment we're looking at it as a one-off. But I think according to how successful we are and how much money we raise for our potential partners, ICO ourselves, we're not looking at a very high revenue base from this. We're after the awareness part and setting up other communities and getting people to dialogue with each other. For us, that's what it's all about. So it's a monster project, but then again, everything else we've done, we've managed to do it. So I suppose if you want to be innovative and creative, you've got to take risks, and that's also one of our mottos. If you have not failed today, if not, why not? So get out there and fail, and if you can fail amongst friends and make things happen, that's very, very exciting. So I feel every confidence that we'll pull this one off. We hope everybody else will partner with us, and we'll see if we can raise many, many tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollars for charities that will make a difference in people's lives.
So I guess in relation, when you've got an event like this, any of the other events that you've done, now you're a seasoned veteran, having been founder of the ICO, integrating communications technologies together to allow the ICO to operate as it does. When it comes to the projects that you do, without any real office, without any employees, how do you inform the public? How do you engage the traditional media?
Right. Well, I think you brought up here one of those areas that we need to work on. We have not done a good job in actually telling our story. People that know us because of one-on-ones and the occasional blurb, but in reality we've kept our head down. But that is changing. We've now got a 10-person communication center whose role is to begin to raise that awareness around the world. It's kind of strange when you think about it that the first concepts of ICO started in 1988. Now, the internet existed then, and the web didn't exist until, early, mid-90s. We had one of the first 50 websites in the world. For us, that's been kind of pioneering the idea of the online office and online systems. We've been way behind the 8 ball in our communication capability. And I suppose also we're a little bit reluctant to turn around and say also what we've always done. We've preferred to show people. When we spoke to people 5 years ago and said we're thinking of going down this path of an online chaotic organization, non-hierarchical, all linked together using online office systems, the kind of look we got from people was the equivalent of, are we going to go away in an ambulance very shortly? And so we were very, very concerned that we had to show that we could do this. And we've done that. I suppose now it's going to be much easier to tell the story. And we hope other people will partner with us. But we make a categorical statement. Any non-profit that wants to partner with us in the world in terms of governance and transparency, we will work with you, providing you're not in disharmony with our goals and objectives. If you're the local Nazi party, please talk to someone else. But if you want to share that idea with us so that you can become totally transparent in your governance and also especially in your accounting systems, please partner with ICO. All of us working together, we can build a whole new model so that the average citizen begins to trust again that charities are above board and that we're not just enhancing nice offices and cars for a select executive group that are managing those organizations. So the offer is there, and I'm very pleased to say that one foundation in the U.S. 2 weeks ago accepted our offer at the board level, and now we'll be working closely together.
Now, your entire organization doing their work virally as it does over the internet, have you also been able to integrate social media to your benefit?
We've begun to put Facebook together. We've got about 180 people, I think, involved on the Facebook site. We have not pushed very hard on that because in some ways I'm not 100% convinced that the Facebook model, if you want to call that social media, is the ultimate way. I think there's another kind of hybrid model that's going to be far more effective. And we're interested in grabbing people's hearts and minds and their passion. I'm not sure to be labeled a friend in Facebook necessarily meets those kind of three conditions. ICO friends are about being open and honest and sharing with each other in a much more closer, supportive way. And that's how we've been very, very fortunate to attract these over 120 incredibly driven, passionate, bright people. And a year and a half ago, the average age of our volunteers was 54. Today it's between 24 and 28. And they are some of the most incredible people you could possibly meet. And so Facebook, I think, can be a little bit superficial. That's not to say that it cannot be amended to be a little bit more in-depth. But we're about in-depth relationships. From those relationships grows trust, grows creativity, grows innovation. And the bottom line in all of this, it's not about the organization. It's about the people who receive our friendship and aid, mainly in the developing world. It's their world. And therefore they're represented in our foundation. Whether they can write, read, is totally irrelevant according to our standards. Whether they've ever voted is irrelevant. Every single person that receives aid or support from this foundation is eligible to be a friend of our foundation just as much as I am, and have a say in this foundation just as much as I have. And they're represented in the Council of ICO Communities. And that brings indigenous people together so that Zambia can talk to Guatemala, can talk to Indonesia without the interpretation through the Canadian or American or the British view of what the world really is. What we're really after is to develop a model of indigenous leadership so it flows directly from the people themselves. And we respond to that need through what we call our centers. And as our centers begin to work closely with that community, it's very much like the nucleus and the atom, the model we all knew at school. And then from that, the energy is released, and we call that an initiative. But it represents from the people themselves. It's not about what we think they should have. And we've got to listen a lot more. We've got to understand that a lot more and have that representation. So for me, the most exciting thing in ICO, we can talk about the capability of our technology, which is pretty good. Yeah, we've led the way in many other things, and transparency and governance, and I think effectiveness. I'd argue we are one of the most efficient organizations exist. But if it's purely about being efficient, that could be done quite easily. That's purely a management exercise. What we're after is how can you actually involve people in indigenous cultures in their outcomes, not presupposed outcomes from how we see it from the West. That is the biggest challenge I think we face probably out the next 50 to 100 years. There is no difference, in my opinion, from a person who goes to the developing world, fired up to bring about social change from maybe a liberal, progressive viewpoint, fired up to do what they think is right for those people. And I'm not denying the motives for a second, but for the people there, the difference between that person and a 19th century imperialist going with a gun and a Bible and saying that I'm here to help bring you a better world or civilize you for your sake, I see the difference as pretty narrow. And I think this is something that all of us involved in development around the world has to really take on board, is the emotional impact of what we do. And I'm very, very pleased that many of our people involved as team members say, for instance, in Victoria, have come from the developing world and who are passionate about trying to change that traditional model. It's not easy because we've grown up with this idea, and it seems harsh. I'm not being judgmental as to people's motives, but we've got to actually look carefully how we see the world, and the world is dramatically changing. The West has dominated economics and social theory now, probably, arguably, for the last 100 years, if not before that, through violence. Then we went into the capability because we had technology. Now it's switching. And, sometime over the next few years, the United States will be the second largest economy in the world. That's going to bring about fundamental change that we're not used to. And I think it's probably some good changes. But somewhere I won't say it's an arrogance of learning or an arrogance of resources. Maybe we just haven't exhibited the sensitivity that we should have. And I'm very delighted and proud of the fact that the Council of ICO Communities is based out of northern Uganda, and it's chaired by a Ugandan, Peter Lekua, who's 30 years of age and has a master's in economics. And Peter has a distinguished record already by the time he's 30, and he's on our board of directors. And his job is to bring about indigenous leadership for our foundation. So, legally we're headquartered in Victoria, BC. The center of gravity will be moving dramatically over the next 2 or 3 years offshore from British Columbia, that's for sure. That to me is wonderful.
Because you do so much of your work on the internet, what would you say to critics who would argue that our dependency on the internet kind of works against fostering interpersonal human relations?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I mean, it certainly can. I mean, does it replace a hug? It sure doesn't, right? But let's look at it. Is it better than not communicating? And how do we get away from the superficiality of the Twitter and the Facebook? These are deep philosophical questions, but also technical questions. These are things that we in ICO, I'm delighted to say, are beginning to look at. One of the important areas is Project X that we just announced recently. Project X is to build a whole new software package incorporating accounting, human resource management, communication processes, team building processes, everything built into the net. And we aim to have the conceptual model ready for the late summer coming year, and then we're going to build that, and then we will make it available to every single non-profit in the world free of charge. We believe that software package can bring about dramatic change. Now, within that software package, we're going to be biased. We're going to say it's going to be non-hierarchical, it's going to be chaotic, and it's going to work in a very different way than traditional models. It's going to have governance in it, but above all, it's going to have systems built within it that are more in-depth communications capability than Facebook does and social media does today. And we're at the first stages of social media. I mean, Facebook 3 years ago was still just the portent of a small group of university students. MySpace, about 4 years ago, was essentially high school students. That's changed dramatically now. Even all the grandmothers and grandfathers have Facebook, so they can see the kids and grandchildren. But these are very, very exciting times, and I think that we'll work it through. We need people to partner with. We want people with different opinions than ourselves to say, hey, let's make a model. But if we could actually change something, you've got to think in these terms, I think. Kofi Annan, about 15 years ago probably now, had a throwaway statement that 10 cents in the dollar gets to the developing world. 10 cents. 90 cents goes in program, cost, and overhead, and theoretically wastage. 90 cents. Only 10 cents Now, if that is a true figure, an ICO, we can get 100 cents in the dollar. Now, let's all of us dream for a minute. What would happen if all of us worked together in non-profits and said, every year for the next 10 years, we'll have a 1% increase in our capability and efficiency using a different concept, using maybe a different kind of approach to management and software support for that. If we did that, in 10 years, on average, we've doubled the amount of money to the developing world. It's now flowing from the indigenous people themselves, totally transparent. I have a suspicion that people will give a lot of money. A few months ago, a person came in with $70,000 check to our foundation for Guatemala because they trusted us. Why did they trust us? 100% volunteer based and transparent and accountable. You can see where the money went. I think that capability today using the internet is dramatic, and it can bring about a lot of change. Does that mean that every non-profit can do that? At this stage, no. Can they do it in 5 years? They will have no option. They have no option. This isn't a case of saying, would you like to be transparent? The market will dictate. If you are not transparent in governance and in your accounting, in about 5 years, the marketplace of donations will make that quite apparent.
Now, your organization offers the possibilities for people to make their own initiative. Would you say you have a target audience?
Well, so far it's kind of interesting. We had one just recently. A person came up with an idea for trees in Tanzania. They live on an island in the Discovery Islands. Yeah, I wouldn't say there's a target audience at all. I think that right on our website, it says in there, got an initiative, a question mark, just click it and see what happens. 6 questions. And it's up to us then to dig into it a little bit more from our planning and development people. But if you've got an initiative or an idea, let's share it. That's the whole part of being human, is sharing and understanding and being supportive of each other. We see friendship as a critical component of that, and caring for each other. When you do those things, the world changes dramatically.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.